this is Doug. You are listening to a very special edition of What's the Hazard today. It is Friday, December 9th. We're coming to you from Omaha, Nebraska on a cold, chilly morning, damp morning. My guest today, I'm gonna skip right to the meat of the program. Normally I throw out some anecdotes or some things from my week, but we are going to get right to the guest today. My guest today is an icon in the Nebraska safety and health community. No shit. I'm serious. Probably one of the inaugural members of the Nebraska Safety and Health Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken. Do we have such a thing? I don't know. We're going to have one after this. A recently anointed PhD, which I am most impressed by. Congratulations. Any other accolades you want me to throw out there before we get to?
No, that's fine.
It's my pleasure, truly, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Doris Burns.
Whoa, Dr.
Excellent.
Doris Burns.
Does that sound awesome?
It sounds weird.
You haven't gotten used to it yet, probably, have you?
I haven't. I mean, because I'm still Doris.
Are you?
For you.
To everybody? Well, with a few exceptions, probably.
And you helped me get that doctorate.
Well, I squeezed on the thing for a little while.
Oh, boy, that doesn't sound good.
Right. Well, that was the... Right. Well, I mean, I twisted the thing. I didn't really squeeze on it, But for all of those who participated, no, it was a pleasure to be a small part of that, and I was really excited to do that. I wasn't able to finish the program, unfortunately, just because of my schedule constraints, perhaps, or lack of interest, maybe. I don't know what it was. No, just scheduling, obviously. But I'm really thrilled that you could come and join me today. We have known each other for quite a long time when we look back. And
I never wanted to be one of those old safety people that, look back at your career. Oh, you remember so-and-so.
Right. Back when we had canaries and we were using all sorts of sampling devices I totally agree. And so you have had the dignity to do something new and change and maybe move on with your life. I'm still clinging to it but I hope it's okay, but what I would really like to do, two things. I would like to do first a little, maybe you could talk a little bit about your journey, how you came to be in this profession and some of the stops along the way, some of the things that you've enjoyed about the profession. But I really want to talk about, the dissertation, your research topics and some of the findings and things like that, because to me this stuff is really interesting. Just the whole process of getting the PhD and the commitment that you had to make to do that. Right. You were doing this while you were working full time and living life and all of those things. So were you, I'm guessing that you were probably a young girl on the plains of Nebraska somewhere dreaming about being a safety person one day. Is that how it started?
Oh, since I was like 5.
Right. How did it start for you?
It was by accident, just like everybody else of our age group.
Absolutely.
Because now there's colleges and, degrees now in safety. But when I grew up, there wasn't such a thing, know. So I actually fell into it by accident. I had my husband and I were moving to the Chicagoland area, and a friend of mine who I met in Germany in the Army had this job at Aetna Life and Casualty when they were property and casualty insurance. Now they're just healthcare insurance. Mm-hmm. So when they were property and casualty insurance, he had this job as a safety engineer, and I was looking for a different job. And
what had you done in the military? If you don't, what was your career track in the military?
It was both logistics and nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm a chemistry degree, so safety isn't too far off. It's a hard science and stuff, so it wasn't too far off. So anyway, he got me a job as a safety engineer at Aetna Life and Casualty, and then I just stayed in the safety profession the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a fun profession. It's obviously it can put gray hairs on you for sure, depending on the position you have, and but it's been good because you don't necessarily see what you've accomplished, but you know that you've made a difference in somebody's life.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I envy the construction worker who can drive by and say, I built that or whatever, and we can't really say that.
Right.
interestingly.
That's why I like to mow yards. I don't do it anymore now.
Right, you have someone do that now.
But that's what I loved mowing yards when I was a kid. I loved mowing yards when I was an adult too, because you can look back and say, "Wow, that looks nice."
You can see that.
Yeah.
And is that part of the reason that you are a credentialed professional, and now you have the PhD, and in my experience, there are two types of credentialed people. The people who are truly intellectually curious and they want to learn and they like these milestones. It gives them some sense of accomplishment. And then there are the assholes that just like to lob a bunch of letters behind their name and try to impress you.
That's right.
And but you've always struck me as
in the military, when you have all these we call them patch finders, the people that just go after these schools so they can wear the patches, versus the people who are actually going to use the patches.
Right.
So I agree with you. There are those two different kinds of people that one just have to.
Like patches.
And I'm just, I'm like, I've got more credentials after my name than what I put. I'm like, three's enough. Three's enough. So now I got to decide which one I'm taking off.
Yeah, that's a dilemma. That's a dilemma. You got to put the PhD in there, obviously.
Oh, my God,
that
yes.
has to be in there.
Yes, because that was the most difficult to attain, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so let's get back to, I didn't mean to jump off of your life.
No, it's probably my fault there.
No, it's okay. I was just curious. I know when we met, you were working in town for Grace Mayer. It was called Grace Mayer at the time.
Right.
And you were heading up there.
You know these old guys not talking about.
Right. Do you remember when? That's totally what we've become, yeah. And we've been, trying to avoid it. I'm sorry. I'm going to drag you down that rabbit hole. But that's true. But you were working. You were the manager of their risk department.
And basically, I was their consultant, safety and health consultant to their clients. And so that was one of the benefits of insuring with Grace Mayer at the time, is because you get me.
Right. Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah. And so I helped our clients. I even did informal. And you know this.
I do remember. I remember well. Yes.
So I did, informal negotiations with with OSHA.
Yeah, you intervened with OSHA when the client would have an issue.
Absolutely, yeah. So I negotiated even their settlements for them, and they were happy that I was there. So.
Absolutely. I remember that well because I was young.
That was like the last. You're like, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore.
That was a difficult part for me.
Yeah.
I didn't love that, but I do remember. Probably the first time that we met, we were working. I was with OSHA. You were with Grace Mayer at the time, and Omaha Steaks
was one of our clients.
Was one of your client and one of the companies that we worked with.
Right.
And I can remember walking through. I think it was F Street, and we were walking through that location, and I said, "You guys probably ought to." And you looked at me like, "Why would they do that?" And I was like. Totally bad idea, right? That's not what I'm saying.
I don't remember.
Don't have to do anything, but you scared the crap out of me. And you were just so confident. That's what I have never been. I have that imposter syndrome, and I've always had that imposter syndrome thing.
I have it too.
Do you?
I do.
Because you have always struck me as someone who is very confident and very knowledgeable, and oftentimes no nonsense. Now, we sit here and laugh and joke and have a great time, but you used to scare the crap out of me.
You liar.
No, I was like, whatever Doris says is fine. What are we going to do? Here's how we're going to settle it. Okay, I'm happy with that. And that is really unique, because I think oftentimes many safety people, OSHA people in particular, really are lack confidence. I think I know I did. Kind of hide behind that position a little bit and that little bit of authority, you know?
Right.
It's interesting.
Give somebody a badge, they think that they're sheriff.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And then and so I agree. I mean, especially, OSHA, they have a lot of younger, in my opinion anyway, they have a lot of younger people that, haven't gotten the gray hairs yet. And so. And
they certainly do now. I was talking to someone the other day.
Phil's still there. So.
Phil is still, thank God. Phil is still there, and Brian is still there, and Darwin's still behind a desk. I spoke with Darwin this morning on the drive over about something. But they have a lot of new people, and, the day that I don't recognize anybody, I'm just going to have to retire and quit, because, what's the point at that? It's all passed me by. You had a big job at Union Pacific. Are you able to talk about that, or did you sign some kind of a non-disclosure or something?
I mean, I could say that I had a job at Union Pacific as manager of safety engineering there. So it was.
Yeah, that's a big job.
It's a huge job. It's a huge job.
What was that like?
Well, that I can't talk about.
That's where it stops. Okay, I totally understand, but I was I've never had a big job. You know, I've always had little jobs, and I love what we do, but I never had that, the weight of that responsibility, I don't think, you know. I mean, so I'm curious. I remember when you went to Union Pacific, and we were out Doris is at Union Pacific, and then I saw your title, and then we talked a little bit about what you were even doing. I think you and Beth and I were drinking beer one afternoon.
Us?
Maybe I've got it mixed up. Maybe it was Phil and somebody else, but I mean, what was the scope of your
So
job?
basically, I was the sort of like the OSHA type consultant for the 23 states, going to all of their locations. I would do like mock audits, you know, of. I don't like calling them audits. I call them visits because we're all in this together. And so I would just go and just do walkthroughs of their sites and, you know, make recommendations as to how to make it a little bit safer. And
And how many people were you responsible for? I mean, that's a huge organization.
I wasn't responsible for the people, but I obviously impacted. I mean, at the time I joined Union Pacific, there was close to 50,000 employees. But when I left, it was about 30,000 employees.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Just attrition, or just downsizing, or more efficiency? Has the railroad become more efficient
well, they
and
changed
less?
I would say that they would say efficiency, I'm sure, but they just changed their. You know, corporations, they expand and contract, and contract. And it was just in a contraction period right now at the Union Pacific where they're saying, you know what, we're going to slough off the little stuff and we're going to focus on our premium business. And so that's what I would, you know, it's just a contraction, I would say.
That's a fairly significant contraction, though.
Very much so, yeah.
And when did you leave the railroad? Just recently?
Yeah, so my last work day was in February, but my retirement date was in March. So
Okay.
I'm officially retired from
that's
the railroad.
awesome.
I know.
Congratulations. That is awesome. And so let's talk about this PhD thing. For those who don't know, I mean, can you talk just a little bit about what that is? I mean, it's the pinnacle academically of achievement, and what that is, what the process was like. You did this while you were working full time.
It's very hard, especially if you're traveling. It's very hard. So I wouldn't recommend it to anybody who has, you know, that travels for. If you just have a 9-to-5 job, or even 9 to 6, or 8 to 6, whatever, you could probably do it if you're disciplined and didn't have all. I'm an empty nester too, so I didn't have kids. I waited. So my daughter was already gone, and. So I wouldn't recommend it to anybody that, doesn't have, some time and not a lot of commitment. I mean, I still had commitments and everything, but, and the thing is, I fell into this too. So in the Army, I was, I have my 20 years, and plus I was called up to go to Iraq. And so I had the post 9/11 GI Bill. And I'm like, well, gosh, if Doug Fletcher is going to pay for my education, I should go get it.
It was my pleasure. No, absolutely.
And so I got my master's degree in 2012.
At UNMC?
At UNMC, same College of Public Health. So I have a master's in public health. And then my advisor for my master's of public health, also, he was in charge of this program in Nebraska where if you go through health education in any of the state colleges, undergraduate, like, nursing at, I don't know if Wayne State has nursing, but, or if you wanted to become a doctor, a medical doctor, and you're from rural Nebraska, go on to some of these, colleges, part of the university system, that you would be guaranteed a seat at the medical school at UNMC. So there was this, I forget what the name of the program was, but he was in charge of it. And so when I was finishing my master's, I'm like, and he was telling me what he did. He was new. And I'm like, I said, well, what about me? And he goes, well, what do you mean? I go, I'm from rural Nebraska. I said, I wouldn't mind being a medical doctor. He goes, oh, okay.
Right.
So he picks up the phone and he calls somebody and they look at my, what I'd already had, and they go, well, you need genetics and you need biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you can get into the medical school.
That would be cool.
And so I took genetics and I took biochemistry at UNO so I would have it. But the day before I was to go to my MCAT, and I'd been studying for my MCAT and everything, and I was prepared. But the day before, the rule is no drama. The day before you take your MCAT, no drama. Well, the day before I took my MCAT, drama. I was 50 years old at the time, and at 50 years old, you got to take some tests, doing my thing, and then the day before my MCAT, I get a call and says it's cancer.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember.
And I'm just like,
I didn't realize that.
What? And so I went to my MCAT anyway, but I thought I was early, but I was actually late. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't take my MCAT, and I'm like, you know what? I think somebody's trying to tell me something.
Maybe this is a sign. Yeah, I totally
somebody's
agree.
Trying to tell me something. And then, I had the surgery and everything I needed to do, and I was getting the bills in from my stay at the hospital and everything, and I'm looking at how much these doctors had to write off because of contractual agreements, and I was, I'm TRICARE or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, my doctor, my surgeon, who had, 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of medical school, and as a surgeon, you probably had another 8 years.
At least, yeah.
At least 8 years to become a surgeon, and he gets $1,250 for 5-hour surgery.
Right. It's ridiculous.
It's nuts. I'm like, I know I wasn't going to become a medical doctor for the money, but in just a quick, calculation in my head, I said, okay, if I'm going to medical school, I got to stop work. Mm-hmm. And then I got to pay for medical school and pay for all my expenses. I'm like, that's $1 million right there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that was. And so I'm like, maybe I just need to go get my PhD instead. Mm-hmm. And so, so instead of going to do my MCAT, I had to do my GRE.
I remember all of these. I remember.
And, and I talked to Dr. Rogan, who was actually my advisor on my PhD. And I'm like, why do I have to get a GRE? I said, why do I got to do that? I said, I just got a master's degree from you. I'm like, what if I don't pass my GRE? What does that say about your program that you would give me a master's degree?
Maybe you don't want me taking a GRE. That's true. But that's just...
Yeah, and she goes, well, scientifically, there's no research that supports that if you do a good job on your GRE that you're going to be a good student. And she goes, but that's our rules.
At this point, that's the rule, right?
And so I took my GRE, and that you get your results right away, and I had no idea what those results even meant.
Right. Yeah.
So I sent them over to UNMC, and I'm like, "Is this good enough to get in?" Oh yeah.
And they're calling you by your first name anyway. They know you. I mean, yeah, Doris, you can get in.
And so
I love that. So was that shortly after 2012 or something, or
it would have been about 2014.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I went to PhD route too is I looked at what the requirements were for me to get the PhD versus what I'd already done to get my master's. And I'm like, well, I've already taken almost all of these classes already. It's only going to be a couple more classes and a dissertation. How hard can that be?
Right. What have I got, like 3 weeks invested in this or something? Exactly.
Yeah. So the coursework, I mean, if all you had to do is coursework to get your PhD, everybody would do it because it's that part's pretty easy. But
that's the part I got through. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, as an abject failure, I dropped out of my program. But yeah, the coursework was very typical. You'd been doing coursework all along. You were familiar with that. That wasn't the challenging part. No,
it was the dissertation part. That and you don't realize it. When you're seeing it often, in the distance, and you're like, That's a nothing. But no,
it is something. Yeah,
it's a something.
It truly is a something, which is why this is so impressive to me. Can you talk a little bit about how you formulated the idea for your research proposal, your project?
So I am on the ASTM, International F-23 Committee on Personal Protective Equipment and Clothing. And when I first joined that group, I was quite surprised that all of these standards that safety professionals have to deal with daily, how they're actually made. And because there's really no science necessarily behind this stuff. It's what people think is the best. There's no,
Really?
yes. So, for example, like, what's the definition of fire resistive? Like, you have to wear FR clothing. What's the definition of FR? There is none.
Really?
So there's like a plethora of standards that these consensus makers, what they believe it should be. Why? And that was one of the first questions I would ask in these committees, because I'm like, I don't, want to be stupid or anything. I'm like, but why?
How did we arrive at this?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, she's a troublemaker.
Absolutely.
Get her out the committee.
Absolutely.
There she goes asking why. So I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So it's not always objective. The data, it's not always based on some...
That's right. A lot of it's very, very, very subjective.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, now granted, and basically safety professionals, the people who are on the ground like you, are on the ground trying to make people's lives safer. You're automatically assuming that these standards that you're going by...
Of course we do.
...are, oh, this must be it. Or this pair of gloves that you buy from your safety equipment provider... They told you it was this. You're like, oh, it's a cut-resistant 3, A3. What does that even mean?
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you knew how, these test methods were, you're like, oh, well, that's not what I do. So cut resistance is all about a razor blade, how a razor blade can cut through the material, and how much weight has to be on the razor blade for it to cut through the material. I'm like, well, how many of us work in places that all we have is razor blades?
I was going to say, I've never been in one in 35 years that I'm aware of.
Right. But
that's really amazing.
So the dissertation, the subject of my dissertation was based off of that ASTM International Standard of grip characterization of protective gloves. So I've had experience where we had this glove that when it was dry, it was great. I mean, grippy, so if you were like picking and packing out of a warehouse or whatever, it was fantastic. But as soon as it got wet, it was a safety hazard. Because certain materials, when they get wet, so you're thinking of people in the firefighting, firefighters or ag industry when they're out in the rain, a railroad when you're out in the rain, and anybody who has to deal with the elements. Right. The grip characterization of your glove, when it's dry, when it's wet with water and wet with oil, would make a difference. And so that was already an ASTM International test method, but to get to the test method, they used 5 people, and I'm like, well, no, maybe it's correct, but there was no background on of why they thought this was enough, and they only used 3 people in this. You only have to use 3 people to give a characterization of the glove, and so I'm like, let me see if that's even correct, the way the current test method is, and it's, to be honest with you, it's pretty much correct. We just have a couple of recommendations, and of course, I'm the point person on that ASTM standard, so now I can get it changed. So in 2023, you're probably going to see a change in the ASTM test method for grip characterization. But that's only for dry gloves, and so now I want to continue on now. Now that I know that this test method is good, now I can go on to see if the next test method, can use that test method to do gloves when they're wet with water and wet with oil.
Does that mean that you are going to take a faculty position and continue doing this research with like within an institution, or how will you do that?
I haven't decided yet. So the original research was done at North Carolina State University. And so maybe I can work, they obviously have the equipment and, the place to do all this. Here in Omaha, we really don't have it.
So you could go down there periodically and
or figure out something. And my advisor on this dissertation, Dr. Chandra Achutin, which I think
I've met.
I think you've met him.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll help me too. He goes, maybe you can get a NIOSH grant or something like that. So yeah.
Isn't he with NIOSH?
He is now, but he doesn't do gloves.
Okay, I was just saying, I don't might be able to say a little something to the funding department.
Well, at least point me in the right direction.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic, because it does need to be expanded upon.
It does.
Right? I mean,
It does. Because again, if you have PVC, dipped gloves, they're great when they're dry, but when they're wet, like I said, they're a safety hazard. If you're trying to climb a ladder with wet gloves, it's a safety hazard.
Well, I work with some trucking companies that haul liquids and things, and they have that occasion. Those guys are working dry and with their hands are wet, and I'd never even considered that, and I guess that's kind of shame on me for not doing so. But
the grip characterization is an ASTM test method, but it's still not in any like ANSI standard. And so I think it does need to get either an ANSI or ISO, because I'm on an ISO glove committee too.
Good.
So I think it'd probably be easier to get it into an ISO standard through Europe than through the United States, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you mind if I show the...
Oh, we have a camera there. I didn't even notice. Oh, shoot.
This is... Look at that bad boy. I'm going to read this right after. I do hope to read it at some point, once it's finalized and published.
It's published.
Is it?
It is.
So I can obtain a copy of it maybe through the universities?
There's a 1 year, what do they call it? Anyway, nobody can download it for a year. I'm trying to remember. Embargo. There's a 1 year embargo.
Okay.
But I can probably
it's
bootleg.
fantastic.
I can bootleg you a copy if you really want to read it.
I would be interested in reading it.
If you're having some sort of insomnia.
It feels like a PhD. It's heavy. There's a lot of words. You didn't space the words out like I do on my papers.
It's double spaced.
That's all right. This is awesome. And I do remember, so talk a little bit about the process for those who may be unfamiliar with this. You had you chose an advisor, or you
yes, you get to choose,
and then you get a committee,
right? And
you present your research proposal, and they either or something. How does all that go?
So yes, you do get to, and I interviewed because I didn't know all the PhD, because they have to be part of the College of Public Health, because that's where this degree is through. And so I did interview a couple of people, and I had a different advisor to start with, but I was just spinning my wheels, and then I really wanted Dr. Achutin from the very beginning, but he was too busy. He had too many students he was working with. But as soon as one of his students graduated, then he took me on. Nice. And then once he took me on, it was like night and day. It was like being stuck in the mud to being in the fast lane.
Nice.
Yeah, so I was so... I wouldn't even be sitting here as Dr. Doris Burns. I would have been like you and said I was
right. No, you seem like a finisher to me.
That's the problem. I am.
I'm a notorious starter, but I'm not good in a finish.
Well, if I start something, man, I got to finish it.
Good for you. No, I think that's fantastic, because this took a while.
It took a long time. And again, I think it was because of a couple of years of spinning my wheels. And then, of course, COVID slowed me down, too.
Yes.
Because I had to have I was doing a research project that needed human subjects. And so we couldn't do human subjects till...
Via Zoom. You can't really do that over Zoom. You have to.
So for those who don't know what this project is, again, it's grip characterization of protective gloves. And so the test method is you torque an acrylic rod, vertically acrylic rod, so that you're ergonomically you're neutral. And then see how much you can torque with your bare hand, and then you put a pair of gloves on, and how much can you torque with a gloved hand. And then the difference between the gloved hand and the bare hand is called the percent bare hand control value.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the terminology for decades because the NFPA actually kind of started the glove grip characterization. So anyway, so that's the test method. So when you're saying you gripped and you twisted, that it was.
Yes, that's what I was talking about. As far as they know, that's exactly what I was talking about. No, yeah, I thought it was fascinating because they were different diameters.
Well, the first phase, so that was the whole thing too. So the test method had a 1.625 inch diameter acrylic rod. I'm like, well, how did they come up with that? Mm-hmm. And there was no documentation as to why they chose. It could have been just something they had in the lab, you know.
Right? Yeah. I've got this here. Let's use this.
Right. And so I'm like, well, let's see if that's the right diameter. And so we chose 4 different diameter acrylic rods based on anthropometric information. So female, you know, the digit 3 link length, and then of course with that new math you can go from just circumference.
Allegedly you can. I'm not sure. I just have to get a tape measure and everything. But yes.
So for females and then for males, and so that we use those 2 diameter acrylic rods, and of course the 1.625, and then the difference between the male digit 3 link length and the 1.625 was 1/4 of an inch, so we added 1/4 of an inch to go 1 over. And then, so that was the first test.
Interesting.
And we had to, we made sure we had enough people so that we could have statistical significance. Whereas the first, we didn't know for sure if there was statistical significance on the original test method because they only used 5 people. Now, you still can get statistical significance, but it's a lot more difficult. So this time we did. We had at least 30 men and 30 females. And
these were volunteers from the community?
These were volunteers, yeah.
That's awesome.
You ever hear that 6 degrees of separation for Kevin Bacon?
Of course, yeah.
It was about 2 degrees of separation of Doris Burns, of the people who went through there.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Everyone had a connection to you.
Somehow, yeah.
Fairly closely.
Within, I would say, 2 degrees.
Within a couple of degrees. That's awesome.
Oh no, I totally say that's awesome because what great friends I have.
Yes.
And I have a huge family too. That helps too.
Did you have some family members?
Oh yeah. Oh
that's nice.
Yeah. So
they could all be a part of it. I think everyone just wanted to be a part of it, which was cool.
It was
that
awesome.
was painful, and as I recall, there was a lot of screaming and like teeth gnashing and crying and stuff. But
an hour
I thought it was really exciting.
Yeah, and so so the first step is what you were part of, and that was just determining the rod size. And so from the first step, we determined that the 1.625
Oh, that's what
inch,
it was?
Yeah. So 1.625 inch was actually a
reasonable number.
Yeah, it was good because it was the results were similar for males and females as far as how long it took for them to get to consistency. And so the 1.625 inch, although you could males and females could torque more on the larger one, 1.875, the consistency between males and females was actually better on the 1.625.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yes.
And so you do all the research, you assemble all of this research. First of all, you design your project and all those parameters, and you have to get that approved. And then you conduct the research. Talk a little bit about like defense. What is the defense of your dissertation like? Do you have your committee in front of you and they're asking you questions, or what's that like? So
again, your advisor, so Dr. Chutin, even though he promised me he was going to slog through this all the way to the end, he didn't realize how much slogging it was. He might have changed his mind. But, he's what a great guy. So he now lives out in Cincinnati. He actually drove back for my defense. And he's actually coming back for my graduation, or my convocation. He's going to hood me on the 15th.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So you'll see him at the party.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that was only step 1. I still had step 2 and 3 of my project, which was now the glove versus bare hand. And so we went through that. And then we also thought, well, you know what? What if, I got this great grippy glove, but what if my hand is so grippy, my hand moves inside of it? And so now I have to really grip something really hard to get that torque. And so that step 3 was actually using a pressure sensing glove underneath of the protective glove to see if, okay, this grippy glove is great, but what if I have to grip harder? And so you'll have muscle fatigue faster, you know? And so that was my third step, is to see if that occurred, which it did not occur, which was great. So,
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
I would have not thought of that. That's interesting. And, I mean, you don't want to introduce, you know, more fatigue to achieve greater grip.
Correct.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yes.
Very cool.
So anyway, it was a 3-step process. So you only went to the first step. The second step was actually done at UNO at the Kiewit Center. They have this monstrous environmental chamber. And so people could actually go in. So we had to condition the gloves first so that they're all the same. You know, they're all at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 65% relative humidity. And then people could actually, it's such a humongous environmental chamber. I think all of Omaha should know that this chamber exists.
Yeah.
It's very cool. But then again, I'm a geek.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, it's cool. And so anyway, our test subjects that time would actually go in and into the environmental chamber and do the torquing, bare hand, and 2 different types of gloves.
Okay.
And then some of them would continue on and do the third step with the pressure sensing glove underneath. So the defense is me explaining this whole project to, yes, my committee, and then anybody else who wants to come in, and anybody else who wants to listen in. And so my friend from North Carolina State University was actually listening in too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I mean, so yeah. Then they anybody can ask you questions, and hopefully.
You know, why did you choose these parameters? Why did you do this? Did you consider that?
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Was it enjoyable or horrible or somewhere in between?
So Dr. Chutin was fantastic because for like this couple of weeks before, I would give him the presentation and then he'd ask me questions and I'm like, I don't know.
But I better, apparently.
So I'm writing all these damn questions, especially statistics questions. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So he'd ask me some statistics question. I'm like, I'll write it. I'll go look it up.
Right. Oh. Oof.
You know, because at a certain age, don't you think that you've forgotten more than you remember?
Oh, without question. And statistics was never really my strength in the first place, and so I've forgotten a lot about statistics. It's interesting. I will occasionally rent textbooks from Amazon. You know, you can rent textbooks from them. So I told myself one time I need to be better at statistics. You know, I hadn't taken statistics since college, and so I got a statistics textbook, and my wife is looking at me like, what the hell are you doing? And I got through chapter 1, boxed it back up, sent it right the fuck back to Amazon. You know, I mean, I'm a great starter, but statistics is difficult. I mean,
it is.
At a higher level, that's really challenging.
Yeah, sometimes you think, how can that even be true? How can that be statistically significant?
Right. And I don't think people the vast majority of people who are unfamiliar with statistics even know what significance means. What that?
Oh, that's true.
It's not a really a subjective term. It's a definable term.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So,
don't ask me what it is.
No, I couldn't. We're not going to embarrass each other here. That's not why we're here. But so they're asking you these questions, throwing questions at you.
And again, Dr. Chutin was really good at. He's the one that helped me get my committee together because he knew the people and he knew who would be an easy yes.
Well, who would be reasonable?
Yes,
hopefully,
exactly.
At least they're not there to
right.
It's like an initiation, though. I mean, these people have something that you want,
right?
And they're going to either let you into the club or not.
That's exactly right.
It's not really a gimme.
Right, it's not. And Dr. Chutin didn't want me to even think that it was a gimme, even though at the end he goes, oh, I always knew you were going to get it. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's nice.
No, it's good on him to do it that way. But he goes, and that's exactly what he said, too. And he goes, at your defense, these are people who are minutes away from maybe being your colleague. And they want to make sure that you know what you're doing.
Totally.
Yeah. So
That's not.
So it's a little,
trivial.
it's very stressful. It's very stressful. I mean, the whole thing was,
Do they ask you to step out of the room afterwards and then?
So you have the public.
Confer?
Yeah, you have the public thing, and then the public has to leave, and then you're just there with your committee, and then they ask you some more questions outside the public, and then they ask you to leave the room, and then
Then they call you back in.
They call you back in, and actually, my Dr. Chutin came out and said okay, and he puts out his hand and he goes, "Congratulations, Dr. Burns."
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, really?
What, really?
Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Psych.
Oh my God. Oh, that is so stressful. That sounds incredibly stressful. What did you do afterwards?
I went drinking.
Yes, that's exactly what I was expecting you to say. Did you?
I went to my Legion club.
Nice.
And
I can't imagine what a relief that must have been.
Oh yes.
Because this is 6 years of work.
6, 7 years. Well, of course,
I mean, part-time, obviously, as you had time available. But I mean, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. So, once I, retired from Union Pacific, I was working on this, my dissertation full time. And after I finally, they said, okay, Dr. Burns, it was like the week after, because I was on the 18th of November. It's like the week after that, because there's still some things I had to finish up yet. But that was like the first week that I felt like I was retired.
Nice.
It felt like a week of Saturdays. And I'm like, oh, this is great.
This is awesome.
This is what I've been waiting for.
Yes. And what I am eagerly anticipating myself. Yeah, we talked about that. I look forward to it. And I don't have this in me, but I think I would go back to school or something, maybe. I don't know.
I have so many. I have so many projects. Not just this, but other things in my life I just want to do, and work was just getting in the way.
I know, it does. It gets in the way of the things you want to do.
Yeah, and I'm lucky because, I'm a military retiree, so I have health care. That's why most people stay working, is because they need the health care. But
definitely.
But I have that, so I can retire early. I was 58 when I retired, so yeah. And it's great.
I was 58 a while ago. And work just picked up. It didn't slow down any. Oh, I'm so happy for you. This is really exciting.
So right now, I'm because it was railroad. So to maintain your railroad retirement, you have to maintain your connection to the railroad. So if I go and work anyplace else, I lose the connection to railroad.
I see.
And so I lose my railroad retirement. That's not my Social Security, but so I don't want to screw that up because railroad retirement.
You don't want to screw that up.
No, because that's solvent.
Right. So maybe we could do some under the table stuff. Is that?
No. What I do is I volunteer. So if you take a class at the Safety Council, the National Safety Council. Nebraska chapter, they give me crap all the time because I say it wrong.
You say the Nebraska Safety Council, not that one.
Not that one.
Right. Yes. Are you teaching over there?
I volunteer teach over there.
Oh, fantastic.
And so it keeps me, I want to stay into the safety field.
Absolutely, sure.
And they get a qualified instructor because I'm an OSHA authorized instructor.
Absolutely.
And the students hopefully get a decent instructor. And
they get, excellent instruction.
And then in return for my volunteering at the Safety Council, they make a donation to my late husband's memorial fund at the Legion.
Oh, nice.
And what they do is,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, what the memorial fund does is send care packages over the holidays to soldiers serving in harm's way.
Fantastic.
So last week, Saturday, we had our packing party for the care packages and are shipping 63 packages to Nebraska National Guardsmen and women serving in Qatar and Kuwait.
That's fantastic.
Over the holidays, yeah.
That's noble.
I mean, and when you tell the students that, hey, because you're like, every time I start, I'm like, well, I'm a volunteer instructor, and I know what you're thinking. You think, wait a minute, I had to pay for this class, and then I'm a volunteer.
Right. Where's all this money going?
And so then I explained to them that there's a donation being made to this fund, and you send care packages, and so they feel good about that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't feel like they're getting ripped off. Right. Well, I guess it's okay. Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Oh, I'm so I'm giddy. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, I think it's a,
That's a great,
there's many times you can get a win-win situation,
Yes.
but there's few times you can get a win-win-win.
Right. That's right.
And this is a win-win-win.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So when we communicated about you coming on and joining me, you had said something about, and I don't think I necessarily prompted with a question, but you said something to the effect of, I think safety professionals need to get involved. I mean, truly. And can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, just that comment, I thought that was a very astute comment.
Right.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so just like I was explaining when I first went to the ASTM International, it used to be called, the American Society of Testing and Materials or something like that, but now that's gone. It's just ASTM International. And they have over 12,000 consensus standards. And like I said, the first time I went to this F-23 PPE committee meeting, nobody could tell me what the definition of there is no definition of FR. Why isn't there a definition of FR?
Right.
And there's like multiple test methods for FR. And so, and it's just and most of the people on these committees are from the manufacturers and from the testing labs. Mm-hmm. So I've got this $14,000 piece of equipment that just does cut resistance. I need to make some money to get my, I need to make my money back on that. And so there's, not to say that they're nefarious in any way.
Sure.
But there's other motives versus just safety.
Right.
And there's certain standards out there that you're like, why do we even have this? And when I bring it up, I'm like, this is just going to muddy the water for safety professionals. For example, the FR, there's ASTM F2302, which is another FR sort of standard. And so these test methods are incorporated into ANSI standards. So the ANSI 107 standard, which is high vis, has this ASTM test method of 2302. But it's not even it's supposed to be FR, but it's really not FR, kind of a thing. And I'm like, why do we even need this? It's going to muddy the water for safety professionals. Well, it's not our responsibility that who uses it or not. I'm like, you have 12,500 standards. What safety professional is going to know all those freaking standards?
Right.
And your sales rep isn't going to know all those standards.
No.
You look at some of these FR stuff, and they'll cite some other ASTM standard, which is meant for draperies. Seriously.
Flammability of curtains and drapes and things.
Yes, right. But it has nothing to do with clothing. But yet they'll reference, it's ANSI or it's ASTM. Oh, okay, sure. But do you actually go and look at it? Look at the standard? No. And nobody has time for all of that.
Yeah.
But somebody, we need more safety professionals in these ASTM committees, in these ANSI committees, and there's always slots for safety professionals. Because you'll be a user versus a producer or a rep.
So the companies and the testing labs are making all these decisions.
Pretty much. There's
at least without input from safety folks.
Right. Very little input from safety folks. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's a nefarious thing on the parts of these companies and stuff, but it certainly would help. Because I'm out there alone, to be honest. So I'm seriously, they're getting sick of Doris Burns.
Well, good. But hold them accountable at least, or ask important questions.
Right. And so we need more.
And so how do you go about getting onto volunteering to be on a committee? How do you
just
do
volunteer? Seriously, they're looking for safety professionals, again, users, to be on these committees. And if you got a CSP or a CIH, you can get your CEUs by doing this.
I wish I'd have known that before I lost all my credentials. But
and ASTM, so most people are part of ASSP, but the ASTM International is actually cheaper, and we need people on the ASTM.
That would be great.
And it's like $75 a year to be on a committee. Now, granted, you have to pay for yourself to go to the committee meetings, but you can also usually attend via Zoom or
Sure.
some conference call kind of a
But
thing.
how many times does the committee?
They meet twice a year.
Okay.
January and June usually.
And is there a standard location, or could this be just anywhere around the country, or how does that work?
It's around the country. So
Okay.
I want to say January is in San Antonio.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. So
Okay.
So I'll be presenting this, my dissertation results, because so now this is the F2961 is the standard, the test method, and we just updated it in 2022 because ASTM, you have to update your standards every 7 years, and so it was due.
Okay.
And so we updated with just minor changes, again based off of some of my research.
Oh, good.
But we just did minor changes, and one of the questions from one of the folks was, why are we only using 3 people? I'm like, that's a darn good question.
Right.
But we don't have time to answer it right now.
Right. Yeah, but legitimate question.
Legitimate question, and then we found out through my testing that it probably should be 4 people to get a more consistent answer.
That's really fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that is a great recommendation. And I know unfortunately, a lot of safety people are, 8 to 5.
Well, you're busy. I mean, you've got
There's life.
Yeah,
There's always life outside of work going on.
But we desperately need safety professionals so we are, as safety professionals, we're mostly reacting
Yes.
to other people making our rules for us.
Right.
And we need to be part of that. And we need to be at the ground level. And ASTM is really the ground level because the ASTM test methods are then incorporated into the NFPA standards, into ANSI standards, and also ASTM and ISO. They kind of work together too on some things. So. So that's how I started getting involved in the ISO part too.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so you'll continue to do this, obviously.
I will.
This won't.
Because I want to finish this. I want to at least, because ASTM doesn't have a test method for grip characterization of gloves when wet with water and wet with oil. So that's what I want to finish is that. And then again, and I think I can probably get it through because again, I'm doing it scientifically. So it's a lot easier to get things through the committee if you have science behind it. And so, I mean, I want to continue that. It might take me a year or 2 years to get all of that finished, but I can see the ASTM test method including that. And hopefully I can get it into ISO as well.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? The volunteer work with the council and teaching, I think that's fantastic. And I love the outcome of that and the research and commit. Do you have time to do anything else?
Well, this is finished. So after my big party of graduating.
Which we're looking forward to.
Yes.
Very much so.
Then I might just take a little break.
Yeah, probably.
For at least a week or so.
I would imagine. Yeah, it's got to be exhausting.
It is.
The final push. In particular,
it's very stressful. So for those that don't know, so stress causes sleeplessness.
Right.
Sleeplessness causes hunger pangs. And so when you're stressed and don't get enough sleep, you actually eat more, and I'll eat more of the bad things. So that's what I got to do is I got to lose this weight from stress eating.
Yes, I have that same issue, and I haven't actually slept for almost 13 years. I have, when I turned 50, I don't know what it was, probably stress to some, I just stopped sleeping. I just could not fall asleep. But whatever physiology in your brain allows you to go to sleep, I would lay in bed and just stare at the ceiling, and all of those things are going on, and it's just really noisy in my head. And so I started using sleep aids, I guess we'll call it, and do
you feel better?
I sleep a little bit, I do sleep a little bit. And so I probably feel better than if I had not slept for the last 13 years, but it's not probably great quality sleep. It's interesting because I stress eat, and I also do that Ambien haze eating. So I take Ambien, and so I'll take Ambien in the evening when about 30 minutes before I'm going to hope to go to sleep. You kind of time it. Hopefully you don't mistime it. But there is that window where I take my Ambien, it's starting to have an effect, and then I eat. And then
and your body's then like, oh, I got to digest this.
and now, yes, which doesn't help sleep.
No.
And I get up in the morning and I'll come out into the living room and there will be like empty bags and wrappers laying around. You know, the dog will be over there licking up the Cheetos dust or something off the couch. And I'm like, what happened last night? You know? And I've never had that morning amnesia thing that they talk about with some of these sleep aids. I've never woken up. I always wake up very clear-headed, but the night before has been interesting for me a few times. I've woken up on the floor a few times where I kind of mistimed the Ambien, and my wife's like,
oh, no.
I'm not moving, you know, so you just sleep right where you are, you know, or whatever. It's horrible.
Well, I actually did research on sleep and weight.
You did?
I did.
No kidding.
Yeah, I actually had an IRB-approved study when I was at Grace Mayer. I did a study on can we train people to get better sleep? Mm-hmm. And it showed that people could get better sleep if, you know, they did certain things. So you can make lifestyle changes, not big, even big ones. But then because the study was a little too short, I think, as far as time-wise, we couldn't see that sleep affected weight. But there's plenty of research out there right now that the lack of sleep
And stress in particular.
Right. So stress is it releases cortisol into your body, and that cortisol. I think stress kills people, and it's because of the cortisol that's going through people's bodies, and so that, they might die of a heart attack, but it was probably caused from stress and the cortisol through the body. But no, there's plenty of research out there that says that lack of sleep, you gain weight from lack of sleep.
I would believe that.
Yeah, so I would actually did a presentation to dietitians, and I said, you know, one of the first things you should probably ask your folks is, you know, if you're counseling somebody, is how much sleep do you get? Because there's, like I said, there's plenty of research out there that shows that lack of sleep affects the two. Ghrelin and what's the other one? It's the hormones that make you have these hunger pangs. It makes you feel hungry, and the other hormone doesn't let you feel sated. And so, as a dietitian, you should say, well, how much do you get good quality sleep? And you should have at least 7.5 hours.
That's interesting. Yeah. Do you listen to? I mean, other than this podcast. This is called "What's the Hazard," by the way. I don't know if you've ever,
well, it's on your shirt. That's how I knew.
Yeah. This is the first time I've ever worn this shirt. In fact, yeah. So, there are a number. Those are podcasts that I find interesting. Kind of the health, fitness, wellness podcasts. There's a guy named Andrew Huberman. Have you heard this name? He's a PhD researcher, like kind of neuroscientist out at Stanford. A dump of an institution, you know. And can't find anybody good to hire out there. And but he has a podcast that is really interesting, and he talks about sleep and stress all the time, and the effects of that, the negative effects of lack of sleep, high stress levels, cortisol, and all those kind of things. Really interesting, and I think, you know, I mean, it has become one of the pillars of wellness, you know, that we kind of used to take for granted or ignored or whatever.
Well, and people who, you know, didn't get a lot of sleep, they're like always at work, and, you know, that was socially accepted. That was like, you're like,
a
wow,
badge of honor.
Yeah.
18 hours a day I'm working.
I only go to sleep 4 hours a day. I'm just fine.
Right, exactly. I'm just fine, exactly. No kidding. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so
that was one of the first studies so I had, again, IRB. So anytime you do any kind of research with human subjects, you have to write out your research project in detail, everything in detail, and then submit it to the Institutional Review Board so that they can approve your study for human subjects. So I had to do the same thing for this. So it was kind of nice to already have.
Interesting.
I'd already done it through in a master's program, but I mean, I was just interested in it. You know, I was just interested in
that's
sleep
interesting.
And So
I didn't realize that you would have to go through those approvals. Just is it more of a? They just want to make sure that we're not crossing some ethical lines or something.
Exactly, because and it all started from the Tuskegee. And you probably heard about the Tuskegee Research Project, where they were using black males in syphilis. So there had been a cure for syphilis, but they didn't inform the black males that they were using in their syphilis study that there was a cure. They wanted to see what happened because it causes, people to go insane.
Right, a horrible.
Yeah, horrible. Yeah. And they just kept on going and didn't tell these guys that, oh, by the way, we could have.
Yeah, we could have stopped this.
We could have cured you, but
oh my God.
Yeah. And so ever since then,
somebody thought maybe we better keep an eye on that. Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Holy
crap. So everything in detail. I mean, even my flyers that I sent out to say, hey, you want to be a test subject, even that had to be approved by the Institutional Review Board.
I never even considered that.
In
wow.
the nth detail. Yes.
Oh my.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and you have to have a cogent reason of why you're doing the research. Period. And so yeah.
You have to make some kind of an add value argument or something that this is going to be useful or the information's important.
Yes.
You can't just do it for fun or to torment people.
Unless I put the name Doug Fletcher to torment Doug Fletcher. Yeah. Oh well, okay.
Isn't that asshole from? Yes, I get that. No, that's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That took
a lot of layers to this.
And even that, just writing. That's another one of these, just to do the
just
IRB.
To get the approval.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
And so, what?
So that's one of the reasons why I had to retire, so I could finally finish this thing. Because if I didn't finish, I think they were going to kick me out. They're like, get this done, Doris.
Time's up, Doris.
Exactly.
All of your professors are leaving and retiring. You need to finish up. But I mean, that is monumental, though. And the amount of work that would go into doing this, in addition to working full-time, traveling, as you said, being busy with a full life, and doing this, I can't imagine. When I was in graduate school, I was just a full-time graduate student, and I couldn't finish. I just find that remarkable. So
like I said, I started it. I had to finish.
What else is on the bucket list of things that you would like to do, safety or otherwise? I mean, anything that you have left undone that you want to do,
I've always got. So I don't create a bucket list because I'm thinking, this is my demented mind, I guess, is that if you create a bucket list, then you finish everything on the bucket list, you're done.
Yeah. That's actually an interesting point.
Oh, I guess I can go now.
That would be an interesting research study. Mortality and morbidity related to bucket list completion. That's an interesting question.
That is.
I'm done. I finally made it to Paris. Boom. Or whatever. Yeah. No shit. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So
you just take them as they come in your mind.
Well, I still I do a little bit of genealogy, and that's very interesting. Again, the DNA part of that is very interesting to me. So I actually found out where my great grandfather, I think it was great, where he came from when it was Prussia at the time, through DNA. Mm-hmm. So did
you do like a 23andMe or one of those?
I was on. So I have my DNA in Ancestry, and I have it in MyHeritage, and it was in MyHeritage that I got a link to another guy who's doing his genealogy, who happens to be. So my great grandfather's brother came to the United States before him, and we could actually find information on him. And that guy's great grandson was doing genealogy and put his DNA on, which then linked my great grandfather to his great grandfather, so they can only have the same mom and dad.
Wow.
Because I couldn't find anything on my great grandfather because it was Prussia, which is now where he was from is now Poland, and countries have just gone. This country has it, and that one, and any time a new country came in, they would just, obliterate whatever came before.
Right.
And so there was no records.
No records of any. Yeah.
Right. But his brother had records, and so I was able then to connect everything.
Interesting.
And actually find the ship my great grandfather came over, and and actually, redid the steps. I actually went over there to Poland and
Did you?
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I because he had to go from Poland, he had to go on a train, and I got an old map from that era, and then he had to go to Stettin, it's called Cheyenne now, and then up to Swinemunda, which is called Swinoujscie now. So that was the other problem, is that all the old names are not there anymore. So I couldn't even find the old town of...
everything's been renamed.
And there's like if you Google the name that the town used to be, you can't even find it. And so I was actually able to find somebody from the University of Hawaii that also had family from the same area, so he was able to help me out too. So I mean, that's just kind of fun stuff. Because like really you said, you're curious. This curiosity just kills you sometimes. Though.
I've become more curious about those things as I've aged.
Same here. Yeah.
I didn't really care at all, other than it was kind of cool to be able to say, from wherever.
Yeah.
But
right.
But I find that stuff more interesting now.
I do too. And so that's one of the things. That's one of the things I want to do.
That's a cool project.
Genealogy, and there's always things.
But actually, to go back to and experience these places, I think is really cool.
So yeah, I found in Denmark, I did the same thing with some of my family too, and I know we found cousins in Denmark, so I still keep in contact with them.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I have cousins. My mother's brother, so my uncle had 3 daughters. I have 3 female cousins on that side, and I think their mother, perhaps, my aunt, was from Denmark, and so the 3 girls went back to Denmark together and kind of went to the old towns and homes, and they still had family over there, which is really cool.
And I didn't really think about it. It was just by a lark that I found my cousin over there in Denmark, and she took us around to the old, like where the churches usually have the records back then of baptisms and whatever. And so my family goes back many, many generations in Denmark that we can actually, and I never really thought about it until I went over there and I stepped in the church that my 4 times great grandfather was baptized in, and that and the baptismal font is still there, the same one. And you don't really think, you're just like, okay, this is great. This is great to, it's great to see this, But when you step there, you're like, this is where I came from.
This is really cool.
And and you just like you really don't think that I thought it was okay, this is great, But when you step in it, then it's just something changes.
I'll bet.
And it's
very
very
cool. I have not
cool.
experienced that, but I bet it would. I bet you feel it.
You do.
It's palpable.
Yeah,
this is
it's
real.
it's weird. It really is, because again, I'm not that I wasn't really into it that much, but when you step foot in it, you're like, this is where I came from.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you. We have to wrap it up. Our hour is up, but my last question for you is: have you dropped like Dr. Burns at restaurants yet or anything? What are your plans for flexing that newfound?
So I do go on the Legion. When I went into the Legion after I got it, I made sure all my friends there at the Legion knew I was Dr.
They call
Burns.
you Doc?
So every now and then I come in, it's Dr. Burns. I'm like, yep, the doctor is in.
The doctor is in. Like, pour me one, Bob. I love that. No, I think you got to flex that a little bit, And what is your specialty, Doc? Grip strength, PBE.
Grip strength with grip characterization of protective gloves. Their eyes just glass over.
That's right. Not cardiology. No. But could have been.
Yeah. Could have been.
Could have been, man. Could have, would have. That's cool. You could still go back to medical school. You've got the prerequisites.
Now I do. Yeah, right. That's 4 years. And then you still got to do, what is that, internship, residency, whatever. I'm like,
fellowships.
I'm like, I'll be.
I think it would be a hard sell at this point to get people into medicine. I think we're finding that perhaps with a shortage of nursing staff or, and medical professionals. I mean, eventually you'll just probably, you'll just ingest some type of a nanobot or something that'll do all the diagnosis for you, and you won't need a human to do that. But in the meantime, I don't know.
Yeah.
Are people going into medicine? I mean, I honestly don't know.
I think the medical schools are still full, aren't they?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I hope so. Well, what do you? we're done. Are you going back to bed? It's 10 o'clock in Omaha. You're a retired PhD.
I know. I was going to wear my jammies and have my hair all mussed up, but I thought, I'm like, it won't even phase you.
Oh, no. I come in that way all the time. Oh, that's good. I'm so happy to have you come on and talk and just a little bit about this. And
I want to emphasize again, safety professionals, you need to get more involved in your profession.
That's a great message.
You know, we need people on these, especially on these committees that are, you know, you're just reacting to these ANSI standards and ASTM test methods and standards. You're just reacting.
Yeah.
We need people in those committees that are safety professionals who can, you know, breathe a little common sense into some of these.
Well, let's find me a committee.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's find me a committee that I can participate on, all right? Sounds good. Dr. Burns, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. I look forward to your party. Yeah. I'm not going to say when or where because fucking thousands of people will show up. But to celebrate, this is an incredible accomplishment, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you very much. And I'm happy to be on today.
And you'll come back maybe?
I don't know what else I got to say.
Awesome.
I mean, is your thing always on safety? If it's
no, we can talk about anything.
Oh, really?
This is evolving into more like of a Joe Rogan type thing, other than the $100 million salary and stuff like that. But otherwise very similar, and the quality of the guests. No disrespect intended, but we can talk about anything. Yeah, so we'll come up with something else. Maybe the genealogy thing would be interesting to talk more about.
Yeah, because I think
that's really interesting. And just the impact that has on you.
Yeah, because I really didn't think it would. I didn't.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doris.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a great weekend. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing important work. And we will talk to you soon. Later.